Okay, hopefully I am live and that everything is working. I don't think there's currently anybody on, so this is just for people that might watch this on replay. Hi everyone. What I'm going to be doing is learning Blender. So I have got the Blender Fundamentals tutorial series to watch, which is recommended on the website when you download Blender. I'm just going to work my way through it and I'm going to do it live. You can see on screen I've got chat so that you guys can, chat if you want to. I've got the video I'm going to be following. There's me, hi there, and I've got the notes that I'm taking as well. And that's kind of it. So I just thought I'd spend a couple of hours doing this, because why not? Alright, I'm going to jump into it.
Hello everyone and welcome to Blender. Blender is a fantastic open source software that is mostly known for its 3D animation and modeling capabilities. It's a very powerful software that's been used in feature films, games, TV series, and a bunch of other amazing projects such as the ones you see here. But it can also do much more than that. Video editing, compositing, painting, sculpting, visual effects, cloth simulation, particle simulation, fluid and smoke simulations, 3D printing, and as of recently, 2D animation and real-time rendering. So, if you want to learn about any of these, you've come to the right place. This video series will serve as an encyclopedia of sorts for the fundamentals of Blender. In the next few videos, I'll be going over certain topics that should be helpful for both beginners and veteran Blender users, especially with the recent update. So, I hope you find these videos helpful, and I'll see you all soon.
Yay.
So
okay.
How do we navigate Blender? This may seem intimidating at first, but it's actually pretty simple. Let's start with the 3D viewport. The first thing you'll be curious about is how to select things. Simply left-click any object to select it, and left-click empty space to deselect. You can also press A to select all, and Alt-A to deselect all. Some users may be interested in right-click select.
Right, that's bullshit for a start. So apparently pressing A should select all, and I'm pretty sure that just frames all. That is deceptive. Unless, I know what I might have done. I don't think I've got the settings on default, because I will have changed them so that I can move around. Yeah, okay, let's see how we set the default settings back then, shall we? Just create myself a new tab here. So, how to reset defaults. Edit preferences. Load factory settings. Edit preferences. Load factory preferences. Okay, yeah. Do we think that worked? Oh, it did. Okay, cool. Right, so now I can do the same thing. So it's quite important to me to include what everything will be by default. So this is going to be aimed at new users. So I want it to be exactly as defaulty as it should be. That's what I'm going for. So, okay, so I'm back to defaults. So let's just add something to my notes. And so we're going to have click to select and click in empty space to deselect. That's not how you spell deselect. How frustrating. We'll also have a to select all. And I think you said alternated deselect all.
Deselect. You can also press A to select all, and Alt-A to deselect all.
Okay. Alt plus A to deselect all. Cool. So far, so good, I reckon. Let's keep going.
Some users may be interested in right-click select, which is arguably better for your health, so we made a separate video about that if you are curious. The next thing you'll want to learn is the basics of navigation, how to rotate, how to pan, and how to zoom your perspective of the viewport.
Mm-hmm.
To do that, all you need are these buttons right here. So let's say we want to rotate around our cube. Luckily, we have a very handy gizmo in the top right of our viewport that looks like this. Notice how it responds to our cursor floating above each axis. Go ahead and hover over the blue Z-axis indicator and left click. You'll notice that it brings you directly into what's called top orthographic view. This can be done for any axis to snap to its corresponding perspective. However, if you instead click and drag the same gizmo, you'll find a much more flexible way of rotating your view of the world. It's important for some to know that you can also middle-click drag to achieve the same effect, but from any cursor position. Now, you'll notice that our views...
Okay, right. Then for that one, middle click plus drag anywhere for the same effect. That seems good. That's not how you spell middle. Come on, Shane, what are you doing, mate? Right, cool. What's next?
Seems to pivot around a particular point in the viewport, that being the center or origin of our grid. This also happens to be where our cube is at the moment. However, what if we didn't want to look at the cube? What if we wanted to look over here or something? Well, now all you have to do is click this hand icon and drag to where you want to have centered. From there, you'll notice your pivot has changed when you rotate your perspective. For hotkey users, simply hold Shift and middle mouse drag to achieve the same effect, but from any cursor position. But let's say I want to focus back on my cube again. How do we do that? Well, for that, I want to quickly show you the frame selected.
Right. So we'll call that the tumble. Click and drag the hand icon. Or what will we call it? Pan? Or is that tracking? No, pan. No, tracking. Excuse me. And then Shift plus middle mouse button for same. And that's what I'm going to teach people, I think, because that's definitely going to be more better. Much more better. What else we got?
Which can be found under View. This will reframe your perspective to focus on the object or objects you have selected. This can also be achieved by using the period key on a number pad. Now that we're this close to our cube, you may be asking, how do we zoom in and out? But it's pretty self-explanatory. We have a magnifying glass here. Click and drag it to zoom in and out, or you can use the...
Don't have a number pad on my keyboard. Don't know what to do with my old keyboard either. I might have to bring that out for... Okay. So yeah, the normal full stop doesn't do that. What did he
scroll wheel magnify? You may be asking, how do we key on an object or objects you have under View? This will reframe your
view. Up here. View and someone says hello. Hello, person on YouTube. How are you today? Frame selected. Yeah, okay. That's good. Go to View, selected, selection, or press on the number pad. Okay, so yeah, this is all important stuff. We've got to get the fundamentals down if we're going to make a tutorial. So that will definitely now work. Okay, what else you got for me, kiddo?
Your perspective to focus on the object or objects you have selected. This can also be achieved by using the period key on a number pad. Now that we're this close to our cube, you may be asking, how do we zoom in and out? But it's pretty self-explanatory. We have a magnifying glass here. click and drag it to zoom in and out, or
to zoom, use, click, and I am glad you're fine. Thanks for dropping in. I feel less lonely now. In case you're wondering what I'm doing, I'm literally just learning Blender but live, so it's all new to me, but I'm taking notes as I go because I'm trying to create a 20-minute crash course, like a real super quick introduction to Blender. And so I need to get as many fundamentals about the kind of modeling, or do some simple materials, I think, as I can. And I'm going to try and package that. That's my next video project that I'm aiming for. So this is me researching it. Okay, so to zoom, click and drag on the magnifying glass icon. That says class. Shame, that's not the right word. Okay, let's see if there's another way of doing that.
Or you can use the scroll wheel or plus and minus keys on the numpad to accomplish the same task.
I like doing it on the scroll wheel. Cool.
And that's basically it for the basics of navigation, but you may have noticed that we haven't used the other two buttons in this area, the camera icon and the grid icon. The camera icon will bring you into the eyes of your camera. This is very helpful for setting up camera angles and previewing what will eventually be your output image. Alternatively, you can also use 0 on the number pad. The fourth button here is a grid.
The camera icon, camera. The numpad does the same thing. Oh, what else we got?
This may confuse you at first, but this switches your viewport between orthographic mode and perspective mode. I went ahead and set up a scene here to make it more obvious to you.
Perspective and orthographic. Cool. Cool. Alright.
But you may be asking, what's the difference between these two modes? Well, perspective mode is a realistic view of the 3D objects in your scene, which takes into account how far away objects are from you into how it displays the object. The further away something is, the smaller it gets visually. However, orthographic mode ignores all of that and flattens your world so that no perspective is seen. Everything is angle perfect. This is an unrealistic view but helps immensely with making models accurate, especially in relation to, say, a 2D concept sketch. But that's just the viewport. In the next video, I'll be talking about all the different windows we see here, what they do, and how to navigate them as well.
Cool.
Blender provides a lot.
Right, that's one video. Oh, my camera's over there. That's one video done. So we're getting there. Next up, apparently we're doing the interface, which I will need because I want to do an interface tour. So let's see what we can learn about this.
A lot of information with its interface, and can be flexible enough to fit the workflow you need. Let's go over some of the basics on how to interpret and interact with Blender's UI. Before we begin, I want to point out that there is a very handy display at the very bottom of the user interface. This is an informative display that lets you know what each click can do in the context your cursor is at the moment. It also applies to when certain hotkeys are being held down to change the function of certain clicks.
Cool.
For example, if you hold Shift, you can see the information at the bottom changing.
Okay. Well, what would you even call that? Hint bar at the bottom explains what clicking and do depending on where the cursor is. Cool. What else we got?
It tells us that without holding Shift, your middle mouse button rotates your perspective, but holding Shift pans your perspective. Feel free to refer to this display at any time while watching this series or playing around with Blender to learn more of its features. As a quick reference, here are what some of the mouse icons translate to. Now, the next big thing you'll notice is that each important section of the UI is separated into panels. These panels are scalable if you click and drag any of the boundaries, and they can also be whatever you'd like them to be. Simply click the drop-down menu in the top left or bottom left of a panel and select a different type of editor. You can also create more panels by right-clicking a boundary, clicking Split Area, and then left-clicking at a position of the screen you desire. To delete a panel, simply right-click a boundary, click Join Area, and left-click over the panel you'd like to overwrite. Additionally, if you would ever like to maximize a panel to focus on it, simply mouse over an area and press Ctrl Space. You can also press Ctrl Space again to return. While this is extremely powerful, Blender also provides default workspaces you can.
Okay, so what was it? Control and space. Cool, got that. Killing it, mate. Absolutely killing it. What else we got?
Can choose from that set up the appropriate editors for specific workflows. You can find these workspace options in the tabs above.
Okay. And then default work. So what am I in now? Layout. Workspace options across the top. Layout, modeling, sculpting, etc. Cool. Okay, what's next? Let's just have a look at some of these. So we've got modeling. Does that change? Oh, what? So yeah, we'll lose the animation. Seems to change the camera angle as well, which is weird. Okay.
For hotkey users, you can press Control Page Up or Control Page Down. We will be going over each of these workspaces in future videos. However, for this video, we will focus on the primary editors of the Layout workspace. Further introduction of other editors will be given in editor-specific videos. So, let's begin. If you saw our Viewport Navigation video, then you already know what the viewport is. This is where our 3D scene is displayed. In this editor, you can perform a variety of tasks that interact with your 3D scene and its objects. However, it's important to note that there are two helpful quick menus in the viewport. Simply press T as in Tools, or left-click this arrow here to expand the Quick Tools menu for the viewport. This includes tools such as the Select Box, Move, Rotate, and Scale. For hotkey users, keep in mind you can also use Shift Space at any time to bring up the same Tools menu but labeled and at your cursor location. This works similarly to a pie menu in that you have the option to hold the Shift Space hotkey, move your cursor to the tool you want, and release the hotkey to select a tool.
Pretty cool, to be fair. Let me just go through that again. I need some notes on that.
It's important to note that there are two helpful quick menus.
Okay, so interface tour. Okay, let's just do elements to cover within that. Oh, no. That again. Right, we're going to have the viewport, obviously. Now within the viewport, we're going to click the toolbar. And it was Shift and Space to bring it up, wasn't it? Got that? Is toolbar one word? So it is. Look at me learning how to spell. Alright, what's next?
Menus in the viewport. Simply press T as in Tools, or left-click this arrow here to expand the Quick Tools menu for the viewport. This includes tools such as the Select box, Move, Rotate, and Scale. For hotkey users, keep in mind you can also use Shift Space at any time to bring up the same Tools menu but labeled and at your cursor location. This works similarly to a pie menu in that you have the option to hold the Shift Space hotkey, move your cursor to the tool you want, and release the hotkey to select a tool. You can also press N as in number or left-click the arrow on the right to open additional quick settings, which include your item's transformation data, tool-specific settings, and
you lost me. I was daydreaming.
but labeled and at your cursor location. This works similarly to a pie menu in that you have the option to hold the Shift Space hotkey, move your cursor to the tool you want, and release the hotkey to select a tool. You can also press N as in number or left-click the arrow on the right to open additional quick settings, which include your item's transformation data, tool-specific to open additional quick settings. Press
What
N
arrow on the
as
right?
in number or left-click the arrow on the right to open additional quick settings.
Oh, I see.
Which include your item's transformation data, tool-specific settings, and other viewport options. You'll notice here there is an option for the 3D cursor. This is a very powerful tool which you can see right here. This red and white circle acts as the spawning point for any new objects and can be used as a reference for pivoting, which we'll go over in another video. To place it around your scene, simply hold Shift and right-click. To recenter the cursor, simply press Shift S and select Cursor to World Origin from the pie menu, or adjust the location and rotation settings in the right-hand side quick menu. Now, this feels like a good time to explain what pie menus are for those who are unfamiliar. Pie menus are quick wheel menus that appear around your cursor after a hotkey is pressed. You have
Pie menus, apparently I've got to cover. This is a steep learning curve. Oh, it's the way this guy's teaching it that's making it steep.
three options when navigating a pie menu. The first option is to right-click to cancel in case you changed your mind. The second option is to press and hold the hotkey to initiate the pie menu, drag your cursor to your desired choice, then let go of the hotkey to select, with no clicking necessary. Or the third option is to let go of the hotkey that initiated the pie menu before moving your cursor, then use your cursor to left-click select the option you like. After you get used to where each option is, this can greatly speed up your workflow while also making several options available with less keystrokes. Throughout the series, you will see pie menus quite often for various different contexts.
Yay!
Now below the viewport we have the timeline. This controls playback of your animation. You can zoom in and out with your scroll wheel, drag the timeline with your middle mouse button, change the start and end frames for your output, and create and manipulate keyframes, all of which we'll go over in another video. The Properties editor contains several tabs vertically to display the properties of your scene, your current tool, and whatever object you have selected. To start at the top, this first tab represents the options your currently selected tool in the viewport may have. In this case, the Select Box tool gives you a few different selection options. The next few tabs, which you can see are separated by a small gap, contain your scene-specific properties. Just to clarify, your scene refers to your entire 3D scene. However, you can create more than one scene in a single Blender file by clicking up here. You can also select a scene from existing scenes using this drop-down. This back-facing camera icon is your Render tab. This allows you to change render engines, sampling, engine-specific properties, and other properties that affect your final image and how it's interpreted from the 3D scene. The next icon looks like a printer, and this is your Output tab. This is where all of your output settings can be tweaked before render: resolution, frame rate, file path, file type, and much more. The icon that looks like a stack of photos is the View Layer tab, and is similar to what used to be called render layers. View layers are typically used to separate background and character passes, for example, for easy compositing after a render. However, you'll notice this is only the past properties, not the objects, and it's for only one view layer, the one we're currently in. To select a different view layer to change its properties, you'll need to go up here, similar to creating a new scene. You can create and select existing view layers here. While we're on the topic, I'd like to point out what this panel above properties is for. In order to specify which collections of objects are rendered out in each view layer, you can check and uncheck collections here in what's called the outliner. I highly recommend using descriptive names for your collections and view layers by double-clicking them, but we will go over this in another video. Next, we have the General Scene tab. This has other miscellaneous scene properties that affect your scene, such as your active camera, your units, and rigid body settings. Finally, the Globe icon is the final tab of this section and is called the World tab. This includes properties for the sky and air of your scene. In other words, the surface option for your world is the shader used for your sky or background color, while Volume allows for volumetric lighting throughout the atmosphere of your scene as a whole, such as fog or mist. For the next section, the property tabs will be specific to the active object you have selected. So in this case, I will select the cube. Our first tab is the Object tab. This contains basic information such as location, rotation, and scale of the object. You can also specify parent-child relationships, which collections it belongs to, and visibility of the object. The next tab is a very important tab for Blender. Represented by a wrench icon, the Modifiers tab allows for powerful manipulation of objects using predefined modifiers. Simply select a modifier from the drop-down menu to add it to the stack below. You can use as many modifiers as you like and change the order or application of these modifications using these arrows. For example, the Subdivision Surface Modifier and the Bevel Modifier. This next tab is the Particles tab. You can see the icon looks like an object shooting particles out from its main body. In here, you can create particle systems and add them to the object you have selected. Next is the Physics tab, which looks like an orbiting planet icon. This contains several different types of physics simulations and physics manipulators, including cloth, rigid body, smoke, fluid, collision, and force fields such as wind. The next icon looks like two objects wrapped together. This represents the Constraints tab. This tab is very similar to the Modifiers tab, but deals more so with relationships of the objects you have selected with other objects or values rather than manipulating the object by itself. You can have an object copy the location of another object with the Copy Location constraint, stay above the ground with the Floor constraint, or point at another object with the Tracking constraints. The green triangle icon is for your object's mesh data. To explain what mesh data is, I can tell you that the reason why our cube is a cube is because of the mesh data. If I were to take this exact same object and change the mesh data, its shape would not be the same, but its object properties such as its location would remain the same. Here you can manipulate your vertex groups, also known as weight maps, your shape keys, also known as blend shapes, and your UV maps. Other geometry specific settings belong here as well.
Oh god.
And finally, we have our Material tab. This is represented by a material sphere icon and is where you control much of how your object is shaded during render.
I'm going to need that at
the
some
material
point.
you choose here will affect how shiny your object is, what color it is, and how rough.
So, property editor, bottom right, cover the tabs needed. So what I won't be doing is covering all of those because a lot of that sort of stuff's really situational. But I am going to have to cover a lot of it. So I need to be aware of that as well. Let's keep going.
It may appear to be. The final tab is actually in a different section, as you can see. There's a small gap there. This is the Texture tab, represented with a checkered canvas icon, and is not object specific. Textures exist as separate entities that can be referenced for a number of things, including the world, aka skybox, materials, or brushes. Because of this ubiquity, they are in a separate section. Before we move on, let's go ahead and left-click to select our lamp object. This is the dotted circular thing you see next to our cube. Once you have that selected, you'll have access to its lamp properties, which looks like a light bulb. This is where you can tweak its brightness.
Hang on, why don't I have access to that? What have I just missed? Oh, there it is. Was that not? Oh, okay. Right, I see. Yep, got it.
The radius of light, whether or not it casts shadows, and what type of lamp it is. We can also left-click to select our camera object, which is this sideways rectangular pyramid shape we have here. Now you should have access to the camera options, which include focal length, perspective type, and much more. And that's the summary for the default layout workspace we see when we open Blender. I hope this is helpful for you, and I'll be going into more detail about the other workspaces and what each editor does in separate videos.
He didn't actually explain that one of them is the outliner. Okay. I'm not convinced this is the best tutorial series for learning Blender, but I'll persevere with it because I'm going to look at quite a few.
Selecting objects in Blender is quite simple. We already went over it in the Viewport Navigation video, but to quickly review, left-click an object to select it, and left-click empty space to deselect.
Yeah, that's
but
easy.
There are other selection tools as well. You can press A, for example, to select all, and Alt-A to deselect all.
Yep, I've got that.
However, what if I want to select multiple objects, but not all of them? For that, there is the Select Box tool. This is turned on by default, and with it selected from the Quick Tools menu, you can left-click drag to select multiple objects at once. To deselect multiple objects at once, simply Control-click drag in the same way. You can also enable the Box Select tool with the B hotkey, but in that mode you'll be using middle-click drag. To enable the box selects at once, you can left-click drag to select multiple objects at once. To deselect multiple objects at once, simply Control-click drag in the same way. You can also enable the Box Select tool with the B hotkey, but in that mode you'll be using middle-click drag to deselect objects. An alternative to the Select box is to press C for Circle Select, which acts more...
Hang on, text just came through. Got to answer me texts, innit? In it, blood. Okay, where was I? Right.
More like a selection brush. Select will be using middle-click drag to deselect objects.
Yep.
An alternative to the Select box is to press C for Circle Select, which acts more like a selection brush and only extends selection by default. You can, however, still use middle mouse drag to deselect while in Circle Select mode. Another way to select multiple objects is by simply holding Shift and left-clicking objects individually. To deselect using this method, simply Shift left-click the object again, and
also Shift plus left mouse button to add. Oh no, add to selection. Selection. Woo! Nailing it. Who's watching on Twitch? Apparently there's a person watching on Twitch. Hey, Twitch viewer, say hi in the chat, because it blows my mind that I ever get anybody watching on Twitch. Blows my tiny mind.
Until it's no longer highlighted. You may notice that while you shift left-click these objects, the most recently selected one is always highlighted in a slightly brighter orange outline. This denotes which object is the active object. The active object is the object whose properties will appear in the Properties editor.
Right.
Now, just a quick tip. If you have objects or geometry obscured by other objects or geometry, it may be difficult to select them. To help with this, I recommend using wireframe mode, located here, to see through your object.
Mm-hmm. Continue.
Objects. This makes things easier to select and also allows for selection tools like box and circle select to include otherwise obstructed objects or geometry. Now, it's important to know that each of these selection tools can be used for almost every context in Blender, including edit mode, pose mode, and many of the editors. However, in some editors you will be required to press B before entering box selection mode, such as the outliner. You may have also noticed a select menu in the top left of the viewport. If you open this menu, you'll notice several selection options laid out for you, as well as some viewport specific selection options, such as select all by type, select active camera, select linked, and more. Feel free to try these.
I like that. Also, the selection menu in the viewport. So the viewport specific options. Select. Right. That's cool. Cool little feature. I don't know if Maya's got that one, to be fair. I'd have to check that out. I would have to check that out. I'm learning so much today.
These out yourself, but it's important to know that select more/less only works in edit mode, which we'll get into in a separate video.
Right, okay.
Now that we know how to select objects, let's start transforming them. Transformation refers to moving things, rotating things, or scaling things. So, let's say I want to push or pull my cube to a different location. This would be classified as moving the cube or translating the cube. I can open the Quick Tools menu and select the Move tool. You'll notice 3 colored arrows and 3 colored squares appearing on your selected object. This will allow me to click and drag any of the arrows to move the selected object along that axis. If you select any one of the 3 squares, it will move the object along 2 axes, excluding the axis of its corresponding color. For example, the blue square excludes the blue z-axis movement, but moves your object along the x and y axes simultaneously. But you can also left-click drag anywhere in the viewport to move the object along your viewing plane. Now, in case you change your mind about moving your object after you've already started dragging it, simply right-click before letting go of your left mouse button. This will work for all transformations.
Hang on, I missed
something. For hotkey users,
Tell me that
press
again.
G as in grab to initiate the move along your viewing plane. You can then press X, Y, or Z for simply right-click before letting go of your left mouse button. This will work for simply in case you change your mind about moving your object after you've already started dragging it, simply right-click before letting go of your left mouse button. This will work for all transformations. For hotkey users, you can press G as in grab to initiate the move along your viewing plane. You can then press X, Y, or Z to move it along a specific axis like the colored arrows did. Or you can hold Shift and press X, Y, or Z to move it along the other 2 axes like the colored squares did. You can right-click at any time to cancel the move, or left-click to apply the new location to your object. Fun fact, if you initiate any transformation with the mouse click instead of the hotkey, you can still use the X, Y, or Z hotkeys to perform similar axis-specific constraints on your transformation before you release your left mouse button. You can also switch your transformation entirely to a different one, such as rotation or scale, with their respective hotkeys. Please read the display at the bottom of your window while dragging your object around for more information. To reset the location of your object back to its origin point, simply press Alt-G. Now, what if we want to tip our cube over or roll it around? In order to do that, we need to rotate our cube. Let's check our quick menus for that.
Rotate our cube. I'll rotate your cube in a minute, mate. I hate learning new things. Takes so long. There's a lot of big information dump though, this video.
Aha! Yes, it seems we do have a rotate tool here as well. This will display a gizmo over the selected object or objects, showing each rotational axis. Just like the move tool, you can left-click drag any of the colored rings to rotate along a single axis. But you'll notice there are two new areas, the outer white ring and the inner sphere inside of the colored rings, which you'll notice if you hover over it. The outer white ring can be used to rotate the object along your viewing vector. Imagine your eyes drilling a hole into the center of the object and spinning the object around that axis of rotation. The inner sphere is what you see when you hover over the space in between the colored rings. This can be left-click dragged to enter a free rotation mode, which opens all three axes to rotation, kind of like a trackball on a trackball mouse. This is my favorite mode of rotation, as it's the most flexible. For hotkey users, simply press R as in rotate to initiate the rotation along your viewing vector. You can then, once again, press X, Y, or Z to rotate along the specific axis like the colored rings did. But you can also hit R again to initiate a free rotation like the inner sphere trackball did. And again, you can right-click at any time to cancel the rotation or left-click to apply the new rotation to your object. To reset your object's rotation at any time, simply press Alt-R. Now, let's say we want to make our cube much bigger or
hang on. So I've got a feeling if I select this and do G, that kind of lets me move it, right? And if I press now X, that's going to go to the X-axis. So the move tool is also G on the keyboard. I get it. Right, the rotate tool is R. And it's Alt plus G to reset. And this is Alt plus R to reset. What's this bullshit here? I won't register trademark. Ridiculous. Ridiculous. Mm-hmm. Let's see. Right, what's next? Now let's see what to make up. Right, what do you think the scale tool is going to be? I'm going to go with S.
Smaller, which can be the difference between, say, a tissue box and a house. This would be known as scaling our cube. So let's go check our Quick Tools menu again, and yes, a scale tool. Selecting this scale tool displays a gizmo very similar to the move tool, except instead of colored arrows, it's like colored arrows with cubes of cheese stuck on the tips of them.
Cheese?
Cheese. These work exactly the way you might expect. Simply left-click drag any of the colored axes to scale the object along that particular direction, big or small. You can also left-click drag the colored squares to exclude one axis from the scaling process. But what if you want to scale the entire object evenly? Just like moving, you simply left-click drag anywhere in the viewport. For hotkey users, press the S key as in scale to initiate the size change evenly for all axes. Press X, Y, or Z to scale along only a single axis, just like the colored arrows with cheese on them did, or press Shift X, Y, or Z to exclude an axis from the scaling, just like the colored squares did. You can right-click at any time to cancel the resizing, or left-click to apply the new size of your object. To reset the scale of your object back to its original scale, simply press Alt-S.
Gotcha.
Now, you may have noticed that during the rotation and scale procedures, there was a definitive center or pivot to the transformations.
There was,
This is usually what the orange dot on your object signifies. However, what if you don't want to rotate or scale based on the object's pivot point? What if you want to rotate from the world origin or scale upwards relative to the floor level? That's where the 3D cursor comes in.
Oh, right.
This red and white circle is called the 3D cursor. It can act as the pivot point of any object as long as you click this drop-down menu here and select 3D cursor. Try it out with rotation and scale modes.
Hang on, show me that again.
It can act as the pivot point of any object as long as you click this drop-down menu here and select 3D cursor. Try it out with rotation and scale modes. You can move the 3D cursor throughout your scene by selecting the 3D cursor tool in the Quick Tool menu and left-click dragging anywhere in your scene, or pressing Shift right-click.
I'm probably not going to do that.
You can change the pivot point back to the default median point at...
So yeah, that's the 3D cursor tool. So now if I do that and we press R, why isn't R working now for rotate? Spacebar. Huh. Apparently not in 3D cursor mode. Why is that not working? Object wasn't selected. Right, hang on. See, now my 3D cursor's in the wrong place. What do we have to do to reset it? Right. Bullshit. Let's redo. I hate it when it's Control Shift and Z. Right, so now we select this and we turn that on. Do we? Now when I press R, it's still not doing it. You're clearly missing something. Show me again.
Anytime.
This is
bollocks. What if you don't want to rotate or scale based on the object's pivot point? What if you want to rotate from the world origin or scale upwards relative to the floor level? That's where the 3D cursor comes in. This red and white circle is called the 3D cursor. It can act as the pivot point of any object as long as you click this drop-down menu here and select 3D cursor. Try it out with rotation and scale modes. You can move the 3D cursor throughout your scene by selecting the 3D cursor tool in the Quick Tool menu and left-click dragging anywhere in your scene.
Wow. So I've now got that on. Oh, stop. What's the keyboard shortcut for the selection tool? be okay. Oh no, not like that. Select box. Thank you. This is irritating me.
Or pressing Shift right click. You can change the pivot point back to the default median point at any time with the same menu as before. The 3D cursor can also be used for moving your object. I personally love this feature for quick moving your object to.
Where's the medium point? I don't think that is a medium point, is it? That's bullshit is what it is, mate. Yeah. I'll come back to this because it's
to a specific point.
irritating.
Simply move your 3D cursor to where you want your object to go. Then go to Object, Snap, Selection to Cursor. For hotkey users, you can simply press Shift right click and then Shift S and use the pie menu to select Selection to Cursor.
God.
Just a friendly reminder, if you ever need to recenter your 3D cursor, Cursor to World Origin is also in the same Snap menu. Okay.
Whoa, what did I just do? Scale.
Now let's do World Origin. Just a friendly reminder, and use the pie menu to simply press Shift right click and then Shift S and
Shift right click. No. Shift right click. Shift S. Cursor to world origin. Alright, well I've done that, I think. Why is that not centered? So that would be Alt and T for translate? No, Alt and G. Hey, there we go. I'm getting there. I can figure stuff out.
And use the pie menu to select Selection to Cursor. Just a friendly reminder, if you ever need to recenter your 3D cursor, Cursor to World Origin is also in the same Snap menu.
Yeah, cheers,
Okay,
Bruce.
now let's say I've run into the issue where I've rotated my object, but now I can't move the object along its own upwards axis. I'm stuck moving directly up, and that's not helpful. Don't worry, all you have to do is change this drop-down menu up here from global to local. This will change all gizmos to display the object's local axes instead of the global axes for all transformations.
That's good.
For hotkey users, you can access local axes simply by pressing X, Y, or Z twice instead of once after initiating your transformation.
Oh, that makes good.
Another helpful tip for transforming your objects is to hold Shift when trying to be more accurate. Holding Shift while moving, rotating, or scaling your object will reduce the sensitivity of your cursor affecting the transformation values. In other words, it'll change slower as you move your cursor, giving you more nuanced control over the end result. In fact, holding Shift will achieve the same effect for cursor-dependent values in most other editors as well. For example, dragging a number along a slider. Alright, but what if I have a bunch of boxes that need to be perfectly aligned? Eyeballing it isn't very practical or helpful. This is where you can use the snapping options located at the top here. This magnet icon toggles snapping on and off, but you can also press Shift Tab. The drop-down menu to the right of it allows you to snap to increments, vertices, faces, volumes, or edges. This way, you can align your boxes perfectly to each other without relying on guesswork. Selection and transformation are the foundation of manipulating your 3D scene in Blender. To add an object in Blender, it's really quite simple. Let's say we want to add another mesh. Maybe a torus, for example, or a donut. Simply go to the Add menu in the top left.
Donut. Right. Before I get into any more videos, I'm going to just take a break for 5 minutes, make myself a cup of tea. Because it's a bit of a slog, this, isn't it? I've done an hour. I'll have a cup of tea and I'll do another hour. So yeah, Give me 5 minutes, guys. When I say guys, I think there's maybe one or two of you, and I'll be back. Right, where's my be right back image? How's that? Are we back? Cool. All right, my microphone just broke. Right, now I am going to go and make a drink. BRB, guys, BRB. Okay, I'm back, and oh, my chat's just started again. Weird. Okay, I'm back, and this time I have tea. I don't know if you'll be able to see it. There you go. Look, oh, the camera's trying to filter it out. Look, there you go, tea. Good cup of tea. Right. Should we continue? Yes, we shall continue. Good call. Right, what's this video? Does it tell me? Let's see. We've done viewport interface, select and transform. Add and delete, I guess. Let's give it a go. Do you know what? There's a dog barking in the background, but you guys can't hear it because of the NVIDIA broadcast filters. I think that's amazing. AI for the win. Okay, let's see what he's got to say on this video then.
Go to Mesh and select Torus. For hotkey users, you can simply press Shift-A to open your Add menu. You'll notice that the new mesh spawns where the 3D...
Okay. We want that one. That's the important stuff. Creating new meshes. So, from the Add menu, or tell me that again, mister.
Cursor is Torus. For
Torus.
hotkey users, you can simply press Shift-A to open your Add menu.
Or Shift plus A to open the Add menu. Beautiful. Okay, continue.
You'll notice that the new mesh spawns where the 3D cursor is. This is an important feature of the 3D cursor. I'm sure you've noticed you can add things other than toruses. Inside the mesh menu alone, you can see all of these primitives here. Most of them are self-explanatory, but you might be curious about what this monkey option is. The monkey is the head of a character called Suzanne. Suzanne is Blender's alternative to more common test models such as the Utah Teapot and the Stanford Bunny. As a low polygon model of only 500 faces, Suzanne is often used as a quick and easy way to test material, animation, rigs, texture, and lighting setups. Fun fact, the largest Blender contest, which takes place at the Blender conference every year, gives out an award called the Suzanne Award. To delete an object, there are 3 ways to do it. Make sure you have the correct object or objects selected, then go to Object, Delete. For hotkey users, you can press X or the delete key. However, if you press X, you'll get a confirmation message. To confirm, simply left-click or press D. These delete functions...
So, to delete, press X or Del. Easy enough. Chew. Ooh. Sorry, guys. A bit of a sneezy nose. It's not cool, is it? That is not cool. Okay, keep going.
Also extend to almost every other editor where you can delete things. But it's important to know that the deletion menu in edit mode, for example, can look very different. Instead of a simple confirmation menu, deleting things in edit mode will bring up another menu, which will ask you for more information. For example, you can choose to delete the vertices, the edges, or the faces that you have selected, and each one will do something slightly different. If you delete vertices, it will also delete all connecting edges and faces of the vertices you selected. If you delete edges, it will also delete any faces formed by those edges, but it will not delete any vertices that also share another existing edge.
That's really weird.
And if you delete faces, it will also delete all edges and vertices within your selection, but not delete any edges or vertices along the boundary of your selection. Deleting only edges and faces will leave your vertices intact throughout your selection, even if they are floating in mid-air.
Why,
Deleting only faces will leave you all of your edges intact throughout your selection, even if they're floating in mid-air. Dissolve vertices, edges, and faces are operators that try to combine the geometry in a way to act like your selection never existed. It will not always work, but can be very handy for removing loop cuts or extra subdivisions. Edge collapse will collapse all vertices along the boundary of your selection, caving in the geometry where your selection once was. Edge loops will functionally do the opposite of a mesh extrusion. It will reduce your selection geometry down to the next edge loop available. Edit mode has the most complex deletion options available, so while other modes and editors may have similar deletion options, they should be pretty self-explanatory if you can understand these.
Yeah.
In this video, we're going to explain collections in Blender.
What
To
are
do that, we're going to
collections?
try and separate our scene into two groups, one for characters and one for background objects.
I'm gonna be covering
Collections
this in a
are
crash
similar to what you
course.
might call layers or groups in other software. Each collection in your scene can hold objects of any kind for the purposes of organization
Just
and
speed
or
this up a
rendering.
bit.
You can also have collections within collections for further organization. In fact, that's what's already being done, as the scene collection acts as the parent collection for all collections in a scene, as you can see here. Now, to start us off, let's make a scene that makes sense for our purposes. What we want to do is separate our scene into character objects and background objects. I'm going to go ahead and scale this cube up until we're inside of it. This will be our environment or background. Then I'm going to add a new object, monkey. This monkey, also known as Suzanne, will act as our character. If you take a look at the outliner, you can see that our monkey has already been added to our existing collection. Whenever you add objects in the 3D viewport, keep in mind that they will be added to whatever collection you have selected at the time. In case you can't see any objects in your outliner, your collection may be collapsed down to a single line. This is done by clicking this arrow on the left of the collection name. Simply click this arrow again to expand it. For hotkey users, you can press the plus and minus keys on the number pad. So let's try and move our character into a character collection. Well, for that, there are a few ways to do it. But one of the quickest ways is to simply select the object and right-click for a context menu. Under this menu, you'll see the Move to Collection option. If you click that, you'll be presented with a few choices. If we choose Scene Collection, this will bring our monkey out of its current collection. This is not what we want, and the only existing collection we see in this list is the one the monkey is already in. What we want is the New Collection option. So let's go ahead and click that and name our new collection Character. Quick tip, to confirm the name after typing, simply hit Enter twice. Now, if you look at our outliner, you can see that our monkey is in our character collection. For hotkey users, you can press M, as in Move, to bring the same Move to Collection menu for whatever object or objects you have selected. Another way you can add an object to a new collection is to create an empty collection first. To do this, simply right-click any empty space in the outliner and click New. This will create a new collection within the scene collection. If, instead of empty space, you right-click a collection name, it will create a new collection within the collection you right-clicked. For hotkey users, you can simply hover over the outliner and press C to create a new collection in the scene collection. And if you happen to have a collection already selected, your new collection will appear under the selected collection. Fun fact, you can create as many collections as you like. You can rename collections at any time by double-clicking or control-clicking their names in the outliner. So let's go ahead and rename our new collection as BG, or Background. We can then move our cube, which is our background object, to our background collection in the viewport with the same Move to Collection menu, or the M hotkey, and then selecting the now existing background collection from the menu. Or we can use the outliner and simply left-click drag the object to the background collection. Now that we have our character object and background object in their respective collections, you can check and uncheck each collection to toggle their visibility. This will turn them off during render as well for the view layer you have selected. To quickly show you how view layers work with collections, I will create a new view layer up here. As you can see, the checked or unchecked state of each collection is unique to each view layer. But what about our light and camera objects? Let's say we want to have these objects in both the background and character collections so that they are visible whenever we isolate either one. However, when we try to move our objects to more than one collection, it doesn't work. While it is possible to link objects to more than one collection using the Shift-M hotkey, a preferable way is to use collections within collections. Let's take a look at how that might work. First thing I'm going to do is rename our collection to car/bg, car being short for character. If we were to simply drag the character and BG collections into our car/bg collection, we can now toggle all collections within our car/bg collection off or on with one checkmark, but also keep the light and camera objects on while toggling the other two. Functionally, this achieves the same thing as adding the light and camera objects to both character and background collections, as you can keep the main collection enabled while toggling off the sub-collections you don't want to include. If you do happen to use Shift-M to link objects to multiple collections, however, it becomes a bit harder to keep track of, as there will be duplicates in your outliner even though they represent the same object. However, if you do link an object to multiple collections like this, just know that you can remove the object from a collection by right-clicking it in the outliner and selecting Unlink. Now that we have all of our objects in their proper collections, I want to explain a quick tip for when collapsing and expanding your collections. In case your outliner ever gets too busy, collapsing your collections can be very helpful. What's especially great is you'll notice a few icons next to the collection names. These icons represent what type of objects exist within each collection. For example, right now our character collection has only one object, but if you collapse the car/BG collection, you'll see that it contains 2 collections, 2 meshes, 1 light, and 1 camera.
Cool,
This is very helpful for seeing at a glance what objects are within each collection in case you need a reminder. Now, let's say for whatever reason, I want to delete this car/BG collection. Deleting a collection does not delete the objects within the collection. For example, if we select the car/BG collection in our outliner and hit the delete key, the collection is deleted, but the objects within the collection are moved outside of that collection. As a final tip, in the outliner, you can press the eyeball icon to toggle on and off Viewport Visibility. This will not affect your renders, but will allow you to hide objects and collections while you work. For similar options, you can click this drop-down menu in the top right-hand corner to enable selectability toggles and more. And that's it for our collection overview. Collections are very powerful and the foundation of object organization in Blender. Workspaces are customizable groups of panels or editors that can be used for specific workflows. Blender comes with predefined workspaces that can be found in the tabs at the top. These are labeled as Layout, Modeling, Sculpting, UV Editing, Texture Paint, Shading, Animation, Rendering, Compositing, Scripting, and an option to add your own. If you can't see all of the tabs, just know that you can use scroll wheel or middle click drag to show more. Simply left click any of these tabs to switch to them, and you'll notice they look different. The Modeling Workspace is used for creating models by manipulating vertices directly. This is why you'll notice that the vertices or corners of your mesh are now selectable. That's because the Modeling Workspace automatically brings you into Edit mode instead of Object mode, as you can see in the top left-hand corner of the viewport. You can change into Edit mode in any workspace viewport by changing the value of this drop-down menu or pressing the Tab key. But the Modeling Workspace tries to make itself as convenient as possible for you to get started modeling. It also removes the time.
Something worth taking notes of. Modeling. Switch. Selection nodes. The vertex with the tab key. Awesome. Keep going. Pow.
Timeline, as modeling typically does not require any animation. The Sculpting Workspace is similar to the Modeling Workspace, but is used for creating models by manipulating meshes with a brush. Sculpting is a more freeform method of creating models and typically results in higher poly counts not usable for animation. However, it is a great way to start your creation process to then re-optimize your mesh later on. This workspace automatically puts you into Sculpt mode, which is also accessible through the same drop-down menu in the top left-hand corner. However, there is no hotkey for this mode. The UV Editing Workspace is used for editing your UV projection maps, which is another way of saying, I skinned this object and stretched its skin across a flat surface. Anyway, this is a very handy tool for texturing your objects, as textures must be represented in 2D but projected onto a 3D object. You can see the 3D viewport on the right with an object's corresponding UV map on the left. If there was an image linked to this UV map, that image may become visible on the 3D object on the right-hand side, which would show you visually how the 2D texture has been projected. Texture paint is probably what some of you were thinking when I mentioned the complexity of UVs. Why paint on a 2D surface and project that to a 3D surface when you can simply paint on the 3D surface directly like painting an Easter egg? Well, in this case, you can paint any object like an Easter egg. With texture painting, you can paint directly onto the 3D object, and Blender will project your painted texture onto a 2D surface based on the UVs. The Shading Workspace is a very important workspace used for manipulating materials, particularly with node-based shaders. The workspace puts your viewport into Look Dev mode, showing you in real time what your shaders would approximately look like at render. You can also access this from any viewport window using these buttons here. For hotkey users, simply press Z and use the pie menu that appears. If you want a more accurate display of your shader, you can also change it to rendered mode. If you play around with the numbers in the node editor below, you'll be able to see some changes in real time in the viewport above. It also includes an image editor and file explorer for any necessary image files. The Animation Workspace is catered specifically for animators to have all the tools they might need. The 3D viewport is where most of the animation will happen, but the dope sheet, which looks similar to the timeline, will be where all of your keyframe manipulation happens. You may also notice that there is a sliver of the timeline editor below the dope sheet. That is simply to provide all the playback options, start and end frames, and keyframe navigation buttons the dope sheet does not have. For example, you can click this circle/record icon to start automatically recording changes in your object's location, rotation, or scale as keyframes for animation. The camera view on the left is also a 3D viewport panel, but focused on the camera's perspective. This is great for getting an idea of what the animation will look like at render. Now, there may be some of you who are wondering where the graph editor is. If you want to use the graph editor, simply create a new panel and select graph editor from the editor options in the dropdown. However, the dope sheet is so powerful with keyframe manipulation compared to other 3D animation software that the graph editor is not used nearly as often, but it can still be useful. The rendering workspace is used for testing or finalizing the output of your file. If you had a recent render, it'd likely be displayed here. It's important to note that this is the same image editor that we see in other workspaces. However, the image selected is render result, giving you access to slots, which serve as great temporary render test comparisons. These slots are accessible both through the top right dropdown, as well as the right-hand side quick menu, pulled up with the N hotkey, under Image. For hotkey users, you can use J to toggle between the most recent two slots, or use any of the numbers on the number row to go to a specific slot corresponding to that number. The Compositing Workspace is used for post-processing and After Effects that would add beautification to your renders, such as glow, blur, masks, etc. The Compositor in Blender is node-based and is very similar to the shader editor in the Shading Workspace, but has its own editor in the drop-down menu. In order to start using the Compositor, simply check Use Nodes at the top here. This will automatically generate a View Layer node and a Composite node. The Composite node is simply the end result receiver, your final output. And the View Layer node represents how you can use view layers to combine different passes, such as character and background in this compositor. Now you may notice that there is a dope sheet provided at the bottom, which is Blender's keyframe manipulator for animation. So why is it here? Well, let's say you're doing an animation where you want one particular part of the animation to have heavy directional blur because the camera is moving fast, but you want to turn it off after a certain point. In this case, you'll want to keyframe your blur property. The dope sheet is provided to help you keep track of those compositor-specific frames. The Sculpting Workspace is for those instances where we might have to write some code. The text editor is very flexible. It can load and save files externally, enable syntax highlighting, enable word wrap, enable word lines, and a number of other useful coding tools. It can also provide easy-to-set-up templates for common Blender script functions, such as UI elements or gizmos. You'll notice there's also a console panel provided on the left. This is for seeing error messages at runtime. And at the bottom, we have what's called the info panel. This is a list of recent operations that have been performed by Blender, which usually correspond to actions the user has taken somewhere in the software. For example, if you select an object in the 3D viewport and transform it, you'll notice a new line appear in the info panel.
Jeez.
You can copy and paste these operations onto your text editor for reference on how to use certain functions. And finally, we have our Create New Workspace option. This will bring up a few options, but you'll notice many of them are grayed out. This is simply because they already exist in your tabs. However, you can select Duplicate Current, which is a great way to start customizing your own. Simply duplicate the workspace and double-click the tab to rename it to whatever you like. If you'd like to bring a certain workspace to the beginning of the list for easy access, you can right-click the tab and choose Reorder to Front. You can also remove workspaces from the list by right-clicking and selecting Delete. Keep in mind that if you delete a custom workspace, it will be lost forever. In order to save a custom workspace, I recommend setting up a custom startup file by opening up a new file, setting up your workspace, and then going to File, Defaults, Save Startup File. Your workspace will then be included in every new Blender file you create. However, while you are looking through the new workspace options, you may have noticed that there are a few workspaces in the creation options that we haven't seen yet. We may go over these in another video, but I highly recommend looking into the strengths of Blender's 2D animation capabilities, as well as its powerful VFX and motion tracking capabilities. And that's the general summary of how workspaces work. We'll be going over specific workspaces in more detail in their separate videos. As promised, let's talk a little bit about how modeling works in Blender.
Right, so hopefully now this is going to be less of just watching me do nothing, and we're going to start hitting some modeling, which is kind of where I wanted to be. Oh, so I've sat through a lot of, I mean, that was some dry stuff, wasn't it? I mean, there's some useful tidbits in there, but that was, some heavy information dumping going on right there. So hopefully now I'm going to learn some more interesting stuff. Wish me luck. Here we go. Let's see what this guy's got for modeling then.
The workspace itself can already tell us a lot on what modeling entails. As you can see, the object is in edit mode, which is very important for modeling since it relies on manipulating the vertices, edges, and faces of a mesh. You'll also notice that the Modeling Workspace opens the Quick Tools menu on the left for us already. While in Edit mode, the left-hand side Quick Tools menu provides several more tools for us to use, including Extrude Region, Bevel, Knife, and Loop Cut, to name a few important ones.
Cool.
We'll go into more detail about some of these tools in their own videos. The Modeling Workspace also automatically brings us to the Modifiers tab of our Properties editor. Modifiers are very useful during modeling, and we'll be going over a few of those in their own videos as well. Additionally, there are several more options up here at the top of the viewport now that we're in Edit mode. Each of these menus will give you additional operators to work with during modeling.
Cool. Yeah.
That being said, most basic functions will be available through the Quick Tools menu alone. Just to demonstrate real quick, let's say we want to model a chair. You can do that very easily in the Modeling Workspace by simply selecting the appropriate tools. I'll be going over exactly how I made this chair as we learn more about the modeling tools.
That's a shit
Modeling
chair.
revolves around the editing of meshes. But what are meshes? A mesh is a collection of vertices, edges, and faces that describe the shape of a 3D object. But then you ask, what are vertices, edges, and faces? Vertices is the plural
really
form
going
of
fundamental,
vertex,
isn't
which
he?
represents a single point. Edges are the line segments between vertices. And faces are flat surfaces enclosed by edges. But some software will also call these polygons. You've probably heard the term polygons or polys when people refer to 3D models. If a model is made of polygons, it is a mesh. These are the building blocks of all meshes, and modeling involves the manipulation of these building blocks to create a 3D mesh.
Yep.
So how do we create meshes?
Let's
Well,
do
we
it.
already have our cube here, which is a mesh, but let's try to add another mesh. If we go into the Add menu we had used before to add objects, you'll notice that it looks a little bit different. Because we're in Edit mode, Blender only allows us to add mesh shapes. These are the same options that belong to the mesh category in the Object Add menu. Let's go ahead and add a UV sphere. Right now, it's a bit hidden within our cube, so I'm just going to go ahead and hit G to move it outside. As you can see, this UV sphere is made of vertices, edges, and faces, and so it is a mesh. It should be noted, however, that adding meshes in this way will add the mesh shape to the original cube object's mesh data. If you toggle back to object mode, you'll notice that both the sphere and the cube are considered as a single object. If you want to add a
I
separate
hate
sphere
that.
object, you're going to want to use the Object Add menu instead. You can do this by going into Object mode in the top left.
That's kind of cool, I
Then
guess.
go to the Add menu, go to Mesh, and select UV Sphere from there. We will go into the differences between Object and Edit mode in a separate video. Now that you're able to create meshes, it's time to learn how to start editing them. Object mode is the
Alright, so that's pretty straightforward. Okay, so we'll do it here. If in Edit mode, new meshes become part of the already existing /selected mesh. To avoid ensure object mode is enabled. Good note, Shane. Pow. Okay, let's keep going.
default mode of Blender and is helpful for manipulating objects as a whole. Objects can be moved around and animated throughout the scene. However, what this object looks like is determined by its mesh data, and mesh data can be edited through Edit mode. Edit mode is the default mode of the Modeling Workspace, but you can also access it by simply changing this drop-down menu.
Hang on a minute. He's deleted those other meshes. Is there a keyboard shortcut to cycle through different view modes? Like in Maya, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, isn't it? Like, perhaps not. Okay. Sorry, mate, I interrupted you. Keep going. Where's my mouse cursor go? Oh, Jesus, where is my cursor gone? I hate it when it does this. Sometimes I have to unplug my mouse and plug it back in because it just stops working. It gets right on my tits.
Menu here in the top left-hand corner. For hotkey users, you can press Tab to toggle between Edit and Object mode.
Oh yeah,
While
we
in
knew
Edit
that.
mode, you will be able to manipulate vertices, edges, and faces to change the shape of your mesh. Once finished, you'll be able to toggle back into Object mode to move the object as a whole once again. It's helpful to know that your Edit mode history and the action of toggling into Edit mode all count as a step in your undo history. Therefore, after you finish an edit and go back into Object mode, undoing your steps will correctly bring you back into Edit mode with all of your Edit mode history intact as well. For example, I'm just going to change this cube into a random shape by selecting one or multiple vertices and using the transformation tools to move, rotate, or scale the vertices around. Then we'll toggle back into Object mode with Tab. Just to top things off, let's rotate our cube to add an action in Object mode as well. Now let's say I changed my mind about something and want to go back in my undo history. Simply hit Ctrl Z to undo, and you'll see that our edit mode undo history is still intact and accessible. Fun fact, cameras, lights, light probes, empties, images, speakers, and force fields all do not have an edit mode. But there are non-mesh objects such as armatures, curves, and lattices that do have an edit mode accessible, but may look a little different. For these objects, you won't be manipulating mesh data, but rather the object-related data that they might have. However, the principles of editing these objects remains the same. Manipulate the building blocks to create what you need. Blender can also edit multiple mesh objects at once. To do this, simply select all the objects you would like to edit and go into edit mode. You'll notice that you'll be able to manipulate vertices, edges, and faces of any of the objects you have selected simultaneously. However, you won't be able to have any of the objects' mesh data interact with each other, as trying to connect vertices between objects will not work. For example, normally you can press F as in fill to join two vertices with an edge, but because these two vertices belong to separate objects, Blender restricts me from connecting them. In order to actually connect these vertices, I would have to join these two objects into one mesh. To do this, simply select them in object mode, go to the object menu, and select Join. For hotkey users, you can simply press Ctrl J. Once you've done this, you can now edit them in edit mode with no restrictions. In case you want to separate your mesh again into different objects, you can go into edit mode, select a part of your mesh, go to the mesh menu, and select Separate. Here you have a few options, but selection is the one you want. This will separate your selected geometry into a new object with its own mesh data. Let's talk about how to manipulate the vertices, edges, and faces of our mesh while in edit mode. By default, we can already select...
Am I not actually going to make anything? Dude, you're killing me here. I've only got so long of an attention span. Like, the guy that's made this has clearly put such a lot of time in it. It's so thorough. But really, could you imagine giving this to like a classroom full of teenagers? They'd start throwing chairs at each other. Which nobody needs. Speaking as a teacher, nobody needs that. That is horrific. Right, anyway, I'm going to go. I've got about another 10 minutes worth of time to keep going, so we'll see how far I can get. And then next time I go live, you might find that I've chosen a different series.
A vertex with left click and move it around with the Move tool. We can also select multiple vertices with Shift left click. This allows us to rotate and scale our vertices with their respective tools as well. You'll notice that when you select a bunch of vertices, there are edges and faces that exist between these vertices that you selected that will also get highlighted. For example, if you select two vertices, the edge between them will be considered selected. And if you select all four corners of our cube, you'll see that the face within these vertices is also considered selected. You can technically manipulate faces and edges simply by selecting the vertices that form them, but you can also change your selection mode. In the top left-hand corner of the viewport, you will see three icons that represent what selection mode you're in. By default, we're already in Vertex Select, but you can also change it to Edge Select or Face Select mode. These will allow you to select the edges or faces directly. For a more intuitive experience, you may enjoy holding Shift and left-clicking these icons to activate more than one selection mode at a time. For example, if we were to turn on every one of these modes at once, you could click anywhere on the mesh to select either a face, an edge, or a vertex at any time. Box Select, Circle Select, Shift Select, and most basic selection tools are available in edit mode as well. For hotkey users, simply use the 1, 2, and 3 keys on your number row to change your mesh selection mode. You can also hold Shift and then press 1, 2, or 3 to activate multiple selection modes. Another very important tool while in edit mode is loop selection. Depending on your mesh selection mode, you can select a loop of edges or faces by holding Alt and left clicking. In Vertex and Edge Select mode, you will select edges.
It needs to go in my selection notes. So, select edge loops. Select loops of edges or verts by holding Alt and left clicking. Okay, does that work? If I now hold Alt, so it's got 2 along that side. Cool, I kind of get that, I think. Or has it? Yeah, it's done something. So if I now hold G, yeah, okay, that works. Yeah. To object mode, look at that, I'm tabbing through them, I'm becoming a pro.
When alt clicking, and in face select mode, you will select faces. Quick tip, in Vertex and Edge Select mode, the edge loop that gets selected is the one that runs along the edge you alt click. However, when in face select mode, the face loop that gets selected runs perpendicular to the edge you alt left click. The Extrude tool is one of the fundamental tools for modeling. But what is the Extrude tool? Well, allow me to simply show you. If you select a face and click the Extrude tool in the Quick Tools menu, you'll see this yellow gizmo. This is a normal axis manipulator. But what does that mean? Well, it certainly doesn't look normal, and that's because normals are a type of vector related to faces. Simply put, the normal is the vector that sticks out perpendicular to the surface of a face.
Yep.
If we go ahead and left-click drag this manipulator, you'll notice that it duplicates the face and moves it along the normal axis. But it also creates new edges and faces between the original face you had selected and the new duplicate face to maintain a connection. This is extruding. You can also left-click drag anywhere else in the viewport instead to move the extrusion along your viewing plane. You can do this for all types of selections, including multiple faces, vertices, and edges. However, if you select multiple faces that point in different directions, you'll notice that your manipulator is pointing at sort of an average value of where all your selected faces are facing. Keep this in mind as we'll come back to it later. It's important to note that if you right-click while dragging the manipulator, you can cancel the extrude, but it will not remove the duplicate faces. This is intentional, as it allows you to create new geometry at the same location as the originally selected geometry. This can be very helpful when wanting to scale or rotate your extruded mesh. For example, what if we wanted to create a stack of connected cubes? You could simply extrude, right-click cancel, and press S to scale your extrusion down. This will then let you extrude again and confirm to create a new smaller box. This was made super easy by the fact that the extrusion cancel brings the extruded geometry down back to the original cube surface. However, if you do this on accident and you want to remove the extrusion, just make sure you press Ctrl Z to undo it properly. For hotkey users, simply press E as an extrude to begin moving the extruded selection along its normal vector. Right-click will...
Okay, modeling. E is the short extrusion. Let's just give that a go. So we'll click here, I'll press Tab, I'll select that, I'll press E. Oh yeah, then I'll press S. Oh, you beauty. Cool, that works bloody treat. Let's keep going.
We'll do the same thing I mentioned before, and left-click will confirm your extrusion. But the Extrude tool has a few more tricks up its sleeve. If you click and drag the Extrude tool icon in the Quick Tools menu, it will open up a sub-menu with more extrude options. The first option is our default option, so we'll skip that. But our next option is called Extrude Along Normals. This is what you might prefer to use if you select multiple faces that point in different directions. This will allow you to sort of push the geometry outwards along each individual face's normals, but still keep the faces connected to each other after extrusion. This is great for adding a layer of thickness to your mesh, for example. The next Extrude subtool is the Extrude Individual tool. This is extremely helpful for making certain faces extend out independently from its neighbors. For example, you could use this to create spikes or stylized bumps on a surface. Quick tip, this tool works best when faces are selected, not floating vertices or edges. The final Extrude tool is very powerful and easy to use. It's called the Extrude to Cursor tool and allows you to extrude your selection and extend it to the location of wherever you left-click in the viewport. This will still be along your viewing plane, but allows you to work very roughly and quickly when you need to. For hotkey users, if you're in edit mode, you can actually access the Extrude to Cursor tool at any time by simply holding Control and right-clicking. Now that we've learned about the Extrude tool, I'm going to go ahead and show you how to make that chair I made earlier. This is what we want to make, and here's how we do it with the Extrude tool. Simply select your cube.
I'm going to sneeze. Oh. Chill. Good. Right, so let's make the chair then. Let's learn something. Cool. Do it.
Go into edit mode and scale the cube down along the z-axis. We will then use the loop cut tool, which will be covered in a...
Hang on. So in object. No, why is it in edit? What are you talking about? Okay, scale in the z-axis. I'm getting good. Oh shit, what happened there? Okay, what's next?
In its own video to make some additional cuts on our cube. To use the loop cut tool, simply select it on the Quick Tools menu and left-click drag to create a tic-tac-toe pattern like so.
Loop cut. Just zoom in a bit. Left-click drag. Oh, what the funk? I think I've messed something up. Son of a bitch. Should we? Oh my god. That ain't right. Let's try this again. So does it just not select the back side? Oh, you dirty birdie. Alright, well, first of all, it's absolutely mental to just do that. So let's hold Z. We'll flatten it out. Got it. Now we're going to go into edit mode. We're going to get this, and I'm going to left click and drag to create a ticky-tacky toe. 1, 2, 1, 2. Tain't perfect, but it's close enough. Do you know what I would do? I wonder if this works actually. I'll try it in a minute. I put one in the middle, then I bevel it to get it the right size. But that's for another time. Let's just do what this guy's doing now.
This will then allow us to use our Extrude Tool.
Yeah,
Using Face Select mode, select the faces you would want to use to form the back of the chair as well as the legs of the chair. You can then go to the Extrude tool and select the subtool, Extrude Along Normals.
So we're going to do select on faces. We're going to do bish, bash, bosh. So I've not really put these in the right place, but, you know, whatevs. Bish, bash, bishity, bosh. So I've got to get used to the selection methods. It's stressing me out. Then we're going to click and hold on extrude. We're going to do extrude along normals and pull. Oh, we have a chair. Hello.
Then simply left click drag to bring out both the chair back and the chair legs at the same time.
Why is he moving it?
Ta-da! You've officially modeled something in Blender.
That's bullshit, mate.
One very powerful modeling tool in Blender is the Loop Cut and Slide tool. To use it, simply go to the Quick Tools menu on the left while in Edit mode and select.
Why is it always the same freaking cube? Let me undoing it. Ooh, history.
It. Then, hover over your mesh with your cursor, and you'll notice a yellow indicator that seems to loop around your mesh in various ways. If you left-click, you'll notice that the loop cut has created a new loop of edges around your mesh where the indicator was, inserting new vertices wherever necessary. This is very handy for manually increasing the number of polygons in certain parts of your mesh for modeling. So that's the loop cut part of the tool, but what about the slide part of the tool? Well, for that, all you have to do is left-click drag instead. You'll notice that instead of immediately creating the loop cut in the middle, it allows you to slide the loop along your mesh before letting go of left-click. The placement of your loop cut will then correspond to wherever you dragged it along the mesh. If you happen to start dragging the loop cut on accident and would prefer to cut your mesh along the middle after all, simply right-click before letting go of left-click to cancel the slide.
Get it.
If you notice in the bottom left-hand corner, after you've created a loop cut, an operator panel will appear that you can expand. This panel will include settings that will affect what your recently performed loop cut will do. For example, you can increase or decrease the number of cuts along your mesh, smooth your mesh based on a falloff, or slide to adjust your loop cut along your mesh with the factor value.
Yeah, that's cool.
For hotkey users, simply press Ctrl-R. However, I should mention that if you already have the loop cut tool selected, Ctrl-R will simply act as a left-click action, entering the tool into slide mode. So I recommend using the hotkey without the tool selected. Now, there are a few key differences between hotkey users and toolbar users for this particular tool. Assuming you do not have the loop cut tool selected and you press Ctrl-R, you will also be able to very easily change the number of cuts you make by using the scroll wheel. This bypasses the need to open the operator panel to change the number of cuts. When left-clicking with the Ctrl-R hotkey, you'll also notice that it automatically enters slide mode instead of creating a loop cut immediately like the toolbar tool does. Simply right-click to default the loop cut back to the middle of the section you cut, or left-click to confirm your slide position. Real quick, let's take a look at the practical application of the loop cut tool.
Go on then.
For this, we're going to go ahead and make a chair. First thing I'll do is take my cube and scale it down so it's flatter. Then I can take the loop cut tool and cut my mesh in a few places that will give me more faces in particular areas of the mesh that I want to work with. For example, we're going to have to add the back of the chair as well as the legs of the chair. So let's make sure we have 4 faces we can choose from for the legs, as well as
just
a row
made
of
the
faces
previous
for the
video
back.
redundant.
From here,
it?
I can use the Extrude tool, which will be covered
Extrude
in
along
its own video,
normals?
to add geometry to my mesh along my selection.
Yay.
I hope this demonstrates how useful the loop cut tool can be for modeling.
Oh god, does it?
The Bevel tool is very helpful in 3D modeling because it allows you to keep the realism in your hard edges. In real life, no edge is perfectly sharp like it is in the flat shaded cube that we have here, for example.
True story.
Because no edge is perfectly sharp, most of the time you're going to want to bevel it in some way to keep the edges hard but realistic. So let's demonstrate what beveling is. There are 2 ways to bevel. You can either use the Bevel tool in edit mode, or you can use the Bevel Modifier. To use the tool, simply select the tool in the Quick Tools menu on the left while in edit mode. Let's go ahead and hit A to select all of our mesh. Then left-click drag anywhere in the viewport to begin adding a bevel to your selection. Let go of left-click to confirm. For hotkey users, you can press Ctrl B. As usual, right-click to cancel and left-click to confirm. Like many tools,
Bevel with the Bevel Tool, or was it Control and B?
after you as usual, right-click to cancel with left-click to confirm. For hotkey users, you can press Ctrl B. As usual,
CTRL plus D. That's good. We're going to need that tool. I'm going to need it so hard.
right-click to cancel and left-click to confirm. Like many tools, after you confirm the action, an operator panel will appear in the bottom left. This gives you several more settings to tweak before finalizing the action. For example, you can change the width type, which are simply different ways of calculating the amount of bevel. The width is the value you can left-click drag to adjust the bevel amount. As for segments, this setting lets you change the resolution of the bevel, as the more segments you have, the rounder your corners can be. And profile adjusts the curvature of your beveled edges. Checking vertex only option will only bevel using vertices instead of edges as the source geometry. This will look very different, but can be helpful for certain situations. For hotkey
like
users, you can
dice,
also press Ctrl Shift B
die.
instead of Ctrl B to access the vertex only bevel directly. Most of the other settings are
I'm not gonna
perfectly
use
fine
that.
at default values, but material is a very powerful one that I want to talk about real quick. To demonstrate what this does, let's go ahead and add a few materials to our object by pressing the plus key in the Materials tab of our Properties editor. We can then change the color of each
Bevel a
material and set our viewport to rendered mode here. Let's go ahead and bevel the mesh once more in edit mode and open the operator panel. The material index allows you to use a different material in your object material list to do cool things like this. The material index is correlated to the material's position in the list. Another way to bevel is with the Bevel Modifier. Simply go to the wrench icon for the Modifiers tab and select Bevel Modifier from the drop-down menu.
You're going to tell me why
You can see that this has very similar settings as the Bevel Tool operator panel. One important setting that differs is the limit method. This is how you can set the threshold for when the modifier should bevel your mesh. For example, by default, the limit method is none, which means it will indiscriminately bevel every edge loop or vertex in your mesh. However, if you limit by angle, you can specify to only bevel corners that exceed a certain angle. To demonstrate this, if we give this mesh a more varied shape, you'll notice that changing this value allows us to selectively bevel certain corners, but not others. On the other hand, width and vertex groups allow you to hand-pick which corners get beveled. As with all modifiers, the Bevel Modifier is non-destructive, allowing you to work with your original mesh while still having bevel applied on top of your edits with no consequence.
That's got to be better than the Bevel
The Knife Tool is a modeling tool you can use to form new edge loops and vertices. To use it, simply go into the Modeling Workspace or go into Edit mode. Then select the Knife Tool from the Quick Tools menu on the left. From there, you can either left-click drag or tap left-click to begin cutting into your mesh. You may notice at this time that there is still a purplish-pinkish line attached to your cursor after drawing. To disengage this Knife Tool drawing mode, simply double left-click or press E. This will then allow you to continue drawing if you so choose. However, I do warn you not to right-click during this stage, as it will cancel the cuts you have just made. To fully confirm the cuts you have made, simply press spacebar or Enter. As you can see, the visual style of the edge loops and vertices you have drawn have now matched the original mesh. This means they are fully applied. For further details about
press space or enter to keep the cuts. Yeah, brah.
the Knife Tool, simply reference the bottom bar of the UI while you have the Knife Tool activated. Now, if you've ever wanted to cut anything in half, similar to a cross-section, you would want to use the Bisect tool, one of the Knife Tool's subtools. To use it, simply left-click drag the Knife Tool in the Quick Tools menu on the left. This will open up a submenu that includes Bisect. Hover over the Bisect option and release your left-click. From here, you can simply draw a line or cut across your mesh. This will represent where you want to cut your mesh in half. Afterwards, a gizmo should appear that will allow you to adjust your cut. However, the most important settings are in the operator panel in the bottom left-hand corner. Simply expand this and adjust the settings as you see fit. But most importantly, these checkboxes will allow you to fill the face that you cut open, as well as select which side of the cut you would like to keep.
That's wicked.
Both the Knife Tool and the Bisect tool can be very helpful for editing your mesh. Shading in Blender is a very important part of look development.
Right, I'm going to leave that there. I probably actually, I've got this far. I probably will come back to this playlist. I would imagine it doesn't make great watching for anybody that is kind of on the stream, but it is what it is. I've got stuff to learn so I can make this video, and this guy is thorough, to be fair. So anyway, I am done on this stream for today. So I'm going to log my ass off and go and get myself some dinner. I will be on again, either I'll try and find another time this week. If not, it's probably going to be next Monday and Tuesday, which is when I get time to do YouTube stuff. So maybe I'll see you there. Cool. Alright, and team, I am done. I will see you hopefully in a future stream. Laters! And I'll just going to click stop streaming. Alright.